We didn't know when it was going to happen, only he said that I'm sure it's going to happen. I went through a long period of denial, not me.
One day I was at the gym playing basketball, and I noticed I couldn't run up and down the court as freely as I typically did, that I was getting very tired.
One day I was walking across campus, and I became winded.
I noticed that I began to, instead of doing proper pruning in the garden, I was cutting off live branches with buds on them. I told my friend Jane that I needed a seeing-eye horticultural dog who would bite me if I started to do the wrong thing, pull up the wrong plant, and so forth.
I was 30 miles from home one night, and it happened. I had renal failure and I had a heart attack. I didn't know that it was a heart attack. All I knew, it was hard to breathe, and I was coughing a lot. And so I drove home, and by the time I got home, I told my wife, I don't think I'm going to make it.
I also noticed that I had a couple of small wounds, like cuts from shaving that weren't healing.
My wife is a nurse, and I'm in public health. We were smart enough to know that we had better quickly get to a cardiologist, which I did. That was on a Wednesday, I guess it was, and on Friday I was lying on a table having a quadruple bypass.
I noticed watching television one night that this eye was not seeing properly. And it was, I think, determined at that time that I not only had to have cataract operation, but that there'd been a blood clot that was killing off the main nerve that furnishes the retina and so forth.
They gave me open heart surgery, put me on dialysis in the hospital for the kidney failure, and a year later, after taking dialysis 3 times a week, 4 hours a day, I was able to get a kidney from my daughter.
I, in fact, did have a significant problem with my blood. It was highly likely that I had an acute leukemia.
These people have all survived catastrophic illness. Each of them have overcome diseases that might have left them debilitated or led to their death if not for medical intervention, if not for treatments and surgeries developed through the use of biomedical research, including animal studies. These people are living proof of the phenomenal benefits of animal-based research. Many of us will confront healthcare crises in our life, but today's senior citizens can expect to live longer in better health than previous generations. People like Irvin Hester, Ted Parrish, Dennis Rickman, and Daisy Thorpe, they are alive and working because of strides in medicine and health care that are often years in the making, years of discovery and dedication by scientists and physicians like Randy Bollinger.
I had occasion in 1968-1969 to take part in one of the first kidney transplants done at Charity Hospital of Louisiana, and that's what got me interested in transplantation. Last year was the 50th anniversary of the first successful kidney transplant that was done by Dr. Joseph E. Murray. In fact, he got the Nobel Prize in 1990 for his work back in 1954. He transplanted a kidney between 2 identical twins, and both of them survived long term. Now, he didn't just do that out of the blue. He had worked for years transplanting organs in animal models to resolve all sorts of questions. There were people who said you couldn't detach a kidney from its blood supply and its lymphatics and its nerves and still have it work when you put it in another person. And he proved in animal studies that you could do all of those things.
In the year 2000, more than 60 years after research first began into the feasibility of kidney transplants, and 1 year after Irvin Hester suffered kidney failure, his daughter donated a kidney to him.
I was glad and thankful that I was about to begin a new, fresh life and do the things that I'm always accustomed to doing. It was not something that I dreaded at all. I was very glad. I was home convalescing for probably a month before I went outside, But then, right now I do a lot of things. I'm very active.
Because there are so many people waiting for organ grafts, and because many of them are dying while they're waiting, we've been searching for alternative sources of organs. The best sources would be farm animals, because there's so many cows and pigs, for example, used every year in the United States. If we could only transplant their organs into humans, we'd have an endless supply to meet the needs of everybody. The difficulty is those organs have a special sugar on the surface of their cells called galactose that we as humans don't put on any of our cells. So the current research has been directed towards creating a whole herd of pigs that have both complement regulatory proteins that are human and don't make the sugar that humans would ordinarily attack. So over time, we're creating a pig that's more and more able to be used as an organ donor for humans.
Interestingly, the animal models used in this current research are not pigs themselves, but smaller animals that allow for more controlled studies.
We've done our work here most recently entirely with rats and mice because we have inbred strains of those animals that allow us to repeat an experiment with the same immunological effect.
Like Dr. Randy Bollinger, Dr. Nelson Chow has also dedicated his life to research, focusing for the last 20 years on blood and bone marrow transplant studies. And again, just as with Dr. Bollinger's research, it is the use of animal models that have led to treatments that prolong or save people's lives.
The animals we use in our research are mainly mice, and I would have to say that none of the clinical work we do in taking care of patients would have been possible without at least some of the mice work. These are difficult treatments for patients, and certainly none of us would want to do experiments in patients without at least understanding in animals what we're doing and whether there would be a benefit.
Research into bone marrow transplantation first began in the 1940s and led eventually to the type of treatment that saved Dennis Rickman's life in 1995.
The initial treatment was, first of all, to confirm the diagnosis. The hard part was waiting for a couple days for the microscopic analysis of the bone marrow to come back. And during that time, you have a lot of thoughts about what does this really mean. You stop looking at the calendar and looking at the clock.
Dennis's initial treatment was intensive chemotherapy, with the hope of finding a donor so that he could have a bone marrow transplant. His diagnosis had come just as his wife, Kathy, was about to give birth to their daughter, Abby. There was hope that the new baby might be a match, but unfortunately that was not the case, and Dennis began what would be a long search.
Out of about 4 million registrants in that particular registry, there was not a match for me. And it was looking pretty bleak.
Finally, a donor match was found, a 24-year-old woman from Germany.
And the call was, we think that we found a match, and we would like to move along with the next step of tissue typing.
Dennis successfully underwent the transplant. Weeks in isolation followed while his immune system recovered. He watched through his hospital window as Abby took her first steps on a nearby playground. He was grateful to have survived what was at the time a very risky procedure.
The techniques are so refined now that that the survival rates are much better.
Dennis and his wife Kathy are both medical researchers themselves. They understand the years of research that led to the development of the procedure that rescued him.
Bone marrow transplantation is an everyday occurrence now.
When we started doing this, we were mainly using very high doses of radiation and chemotherapy with the thought that we would have to use that to take care of the underlying disease. We've come to realize that we don't need to use such high doses anymore, and that many of the benefits from a bone marrow or stem cell transplant comes from the new immune system.
It's all timing now. I mean, we're making so many advances, and unfortunately, in his time, they still did radiation. And 10 years later, at 55, Dennis is totally cured of his cancer, but he's dealing with respiratory issues. You know, so it's a trade-off.
As patients are surviving better, as our success rate keeps increasing, many of us have shifted to quality of life issues as well, so that I think the initial push, and that's true I think of all oncology, the initial push to try to cure people is still there, but there's a place for quality of life now as well, so that we understand what we're doing. We're not trading one disease for another, for example.
Ongoing research using animal models and stem cells allows scientists and doctors to continue to refine treatments and take better care of people.
I think the other part that's very exciting in stem cell research is this idea potentially that there are other stem cells besides bone marrow stem cells. And so we have research going on, for example, using bone marrow derived cells for patients who have had a heart attack.
These are cell cultures. My research is actually focused on using a clonal stem cell line. It was cloned from a male rat liver about 20 years ago. And what we do is we grow up cardiac myocytes from, and these are from rat hearts basically. We grow them up in petri dishes. We add our stem cells to these petri dishes, and then we look to see how these cells are integrating.
This is Dr. Barbara Mueller-Borer. Her research focuses on treatments for people who have cardiovascular diseases, people like Ted Parrish.
Well, it's the kind of thing that just allows you to sleep well at night, you know what I mean?
Since his bypass surgery in 2003, Ted Parrish has resumed his passion for living and giving back to his community.
So you're put to sleep. Your heart is stopped. You have a machine that is breathing for you and doing all the things that are necessary to keep you alive while you are having vessels removed from various parts of your body, and they are used to replace those that have been diseased. I mean, that is just phenomenal.
Just as with the kidney transplant and the bone marrow transplant, the procedures that Ted Parrish benefited from were perfected only after years of research.
Cardiac bypass surgery and the techniques that were developed in animal models, starting as early as in the 1900s and developing until it was used in humans in the 1960s. The research that we're doing now is actually to augment some of the work that's being done with and the benefits of cardiac bypass surgery.
For patients like Ted Parrish, the future may include cell therapies that actually allow their heart tissue to regenerate.
During a bypass procedure, the surgeon could go in and then introduce these cells into regions which have been damaged. And you can look for the scar tissue and introduce the cells either into the scar or in the region around the scar to help repair the damage that has been done. So it's more of a cure rather than just treating the symptoms. We can restore some of that heart tissue.
Promising discoveries are being made about the ability of stem cells to transform into cardiac cells. But as we've seen repeatedly, the next step in this research will be the use of animal models.
When we go to our animal model and we actually inject them into our animal hearts, we can then follow the progress of these cells by looking for these markers.
So I haven't done them today. This is a good thing to be doing. The gift of life is something you just can't sneer at, and it doesn't matter really how many things you have wrong with you. The first thing I had to get used to was a mastectomy.
Daisy Thorpe, now in her early 80s, has had to get used to many things. She has survived breast cancer, heart disease, and emphysema. She's on medications to slow the progression of glaucoma, and she's had surgery to treat cataracts.
Cataracts is a very important problem because it's the leading cause of blindness and visual disability in the world. In the United States, we're fortunate enough to be able to afford surgery for cataracts, and that's the major treatment. The surgery has advanced so much today that it is very low risk and very effective.
This is Dr. Chris McGann. Her current research is focused on preventing oxidative damage to the lens.
Most people are familiar with taking antioxidant vitamins for their health. And there are a number of disease processes where it's believed that antioxidants can actually help prevent disease. One of these is cataracts. Most eye researchers are using animal models. The most effective way of studying eye disease are animal models where there's gene therapy or there are transgenic animals that are created to have genes modified. For example, there is a transgenic mouse model where 2 genes are silenced in this model, and these mice develop exact disease of age-related macular degeneration. It looks exactly the same in the mice as in humans. So one of the things that we're studying in my laboratory is the processes underlying how these 2 genes function. It is thought that 8 million people in this country are at risk or have signs of developing this disease. This is a blinding disease, and it takes away vision slowly but surely. Now, a lot of things have been developed, I think, are going to lead us to cures for this disorder. There are a lot of developments that have happened just in the last 10 to 15 years. We're making huge discoveries really rapidly, and it's very exciting.
Animal-based research plays an important role in these discoveries, and researchers treat their animal models with respect and care. Humane treatment, careful development of protocols, and intense regulation ensure the proper treatment of lab animals.
What a lot of people probably don't realize is that the animal research we do is highly regulated, and we have to develop our protocols, and those protocols have to be approved by a board before we ever go forward, before we ever order an animal, before we ever step foot in the lab and use an animal. They're highly regulated. So a lot of thought goes into this animal research and how we're going to actually translate it into human research.
Animal-based research provides phenomenal benefits, and the people you've seen and heard here are living proof. Scientific advances, along with the resilience of the human spirit and the human body, have allowed each of them to continue their lives and to give back to those around them.
I'm involved with my favorite charity, Boys and Girls Clubs, and I see boys and girls all the time, and I wonder about them and what they are going to do when they get older. They may be the kids in the future who will add to the scientific research that's going on.
I'm just a guy who likes to help people. I guess maybe it's because I grew up in poverty myself, and I know what it means to be poor. If we can help a person to dream, I believe you can help a person survive and prosper.
Dennis Rickman has survived and prospered. Since he began his treatment on the day his daughter was born, her birthdays mark another year Dennis continues on with his life and his research.
I'm 7 years old. I'm 8 years old in this picture, and I really didn't want to take it.
Since this whole procedure that I've gone through, this whole life experience, my own research has now changed to focus more on how transplantation of stem cells can be used for a variety of diseases. And since my training is primarily in the eye, in the diseases of the retina and optic nerve, I have an interest in applying transplantation therapies to these degenerative diseases of the retina.
The fabulous thing is I can still read. When I'm still gardening, I read gardening books all the time. You don't quit because you can't do it anymore. You keep right on. With all the things that have motivated you and kept you alive all through the years, you still do them. And if you give up on them, you're giving up on life, and that is a terrible mistake.
I am just grateful that I've been given more time to do some of that work. And that's the benefit, I think, that these advances in technology in the medical field have given people like me and many others.
The neat thing about it was that I could make my bed again. That I didn't have to call 911 when I tried to put on patios anymore. Now, I wasn't going to run any marathons, but it really, it gave me a notion that I had some control over things.